Well, policing the capital will be the biggest job for whoever becomes our next mayor. Today, the Conservative candidate, Susan Hall, put crime at the centrepiece of her manifesto. She also renewed her pledge to scrap the expansion of ULEZ and told Londoners she wanted to end what she called the war on motorists, as our political correspondent Simon Harris reports.
One of the things that used to constantly go wrong was a head gasket.
The Conservative candidate was in her comfort zone. The former teenage mechanic dropped in on a garage in the Tory stronghold of Bexley. It wasn't the most glamorous location to launch a manifesto, but the owners here have seen trade drop by a quarter since the ULEZ extension. What do you think of Sadiq Khan?
He should be out. He's ruining my business. We've been here 25 years plus. He's ruining my business. He doesn't care about motorists, doesn't care. He just wants everybody on a bike or a train, which is just not going to work.
Music to Susan Hall's ears.
I will stop the ULEZ expansion on day one, and I will not bring in Paper Mile.
Sadiq Khan has said he won't bring in Paper Mile.
Yes, and we look at the evidence, don't we? He mentions it in his book. He was on a podcast where he was talking about it. It's still in his transport strategy. He said he wouldn't bring in ULEZ expansion, and of course he did. He cannot be trusted.
Hall's manifesto promises so-called knife wands, handheld metal detectors for frontline police officers. There's a plan to review and scrap some 20-mile-an-hour limits on main roads controlled by Transport for London and reinstate free travel during morning peak hours for Londoners with an over-60 Oyster card.
I think it's really embarrassing to present a manifesto to Londoners that isn't costed. I mean, this is a candidate, after all, who celebrated Liz Truss's mini-budget that crashed the economy. So I think we can see that this is entirely consistent with how she approached economics.
Labour says there's a £500 million black hole in your plan.
Stuff and nonsense, absolute nonsense.
The Conservative candidate certainly left it late to publish her manifesto. There are just 10 days to go until polling day. The most recent opinion poll again predicts a comfortable win for Sadiq Khan. The survey by YouGov gives him 46% of the vote, 19 points ahead of Susan Hall. The Greens' Zoe Garbett on 9% is 1 point ahead of the Lib Dems' Rob Blackie, and Reform UK's Howard Cox is in 5th place with 6%.
I think the Conservative manifesto, it was late to arrive, and also it doesn't speak to the heart of the issues that I'm hearing from Londoners, which is how are we going to make this city more affordable for the majority of people?
What strikes me most is it's a manifesto that's very unlikely to be implemented. The Conservatives can't win in London. You don't have to trust me. Ask Conservatives. They're sending letters all around London telling people that they can't win and suggesting they just vote for somebody else. They're not even willing to say for themselves.
In Bexley, Hall unveiled her latest political attack ad, an electronic poster on the back of a van with a diesel engine which didn't comply with ULEZ rules.
Well, Labour's attacked this manifesto on costs. So what are the clear dividing lines between the frontrunners then?
Well, Labour has also pointed out that there's no mention in the manifesto of how many new houses would be built if Susan Hall was mayor. Now, her argument is that she's not going to promise to build tens of thousands of new homes if she can't be certain she'll deliver them, something she accuses Sadiq Khan of. So that's why there's no house building target. But the thing that struck me most about this manifesto is that while the first chapter, 5 pages, is devoted towards crime and making London safer, a further 4 pages on her green agenda and 4 pages on house building, there are 8 pages devoted to what she calls getting London moving and ending the war on motorists. So I think a clear indication there of where Susan Hall thinks she can harvest the most votes on May the 2nd.
OK, Simon, thank you. Well, here's the list of the candidates standing to be Mayor of London on your screens now. The election takes place on Thursday, May the 2nd.
The Conservative candidate was on a walkabout on a South London housing estate. Not any old housing estate, but Henry Prince in Earlsfield. It's where her rival Sadiq Khan spent his childhood, although that seemed to come as a surprise.
There are some issues of antisocial behaviour, particularly on this estate, so I thought I'd come down and say hello.
And you know this is the estate where Sadiq Khan grew up?
And yet I know he lives near, but I didn't know he'd actually grown up on this estate.
Yes, on this very estate.
Oh, right, OK.
But she did get to meet retired teacher and former Sadiq Khan supporter Hamilton Green.
I used to vote for Sadiq
Khan, but I've moved on anyway.
Good man.
Don't like his policies anymore.
Both Hall and Khan have faced criticism for not taking part in some election debates. The mayor in particular has been less visible. While pictures on social media show Sadiq Khan campaigning in different parts of London, accompanied by Labour Party activists, the TV cameras aren't invited.
What are you going to do for me?
It was all very different in the past. 16 years ago, the then Labour Mayor Ken Livingstone and his Conservative rival Boris Johnson appeared to take encounters with ordinary Londoners in their stride.
I think not going out or not being seen to be willing to treat and deal with the public, even if they're going to be abusive and difficult to you, it's not good for democracy, really. Democracy should be about seeing people that you vote for, especially in election time. If no other time, this is the time to go and meet the people.
The Lib Dem candidate took his campaign to Kingston, where he visited a women's hub.
I think the mayor is running scared from scrutiny. He likes to talk a lot about what he's going to do in the next few years. He doesn't talk very much about his record. And one of the things we've discovered is that his record is very poor, particularly on things like sexual offences, but also on crime more generally.
Yeah, I think Londoners have been quite frustrated at the lack of scrutiny that people have put themselves forward to this election. I've often been the only mayoral candidate at the hustings that organisations have organised, and people have been really disappointed to not get that opportunity to scrutinise people.
This evening, the candidates from the four main parties took questions from radio listeners, including one about the mayor's free school meals programme.
Susan Hall, will you commit to?
Yes, I did, and I actually committed to it before Sadiq Khan did. So there's no... I did. I've agreed, yes, and it's going ahead for another year.
Well, congratulations, you've got the Tory candidate perform a U-turn live on air. No. Let's be quite clear. My promise, if I'm re-elected, is to ensure, as long as I'm mayor, every child that goes to a state primary school receives a nutritious free meal.
This was only the third time the candidates had faced each other since the start of the campaign a month ago.
Why have we seen so little of the mayor then, Simon?
I think there are a couple of things at play here. First of all, social media has changed the nature of political campaigning. Campaign teams know they can reach voters directly using X and Facebook and Instagram and TikTok. Not only can they reach them, they can control the message. So there's less need to rely on traditional media where they can't control the message, and less need to go and meet voters face to face, where there's always the danger of hecklers and people disrupting the campaign. And secondly, when you're a long way ahead in the polls, as Sadiq Khan is, you don't want to squander that lead, and that might make his campaign team a little bit more risk averse. Whereas if you're as far behind as Susan Hall is in the campaign, you've probably got nothing to lose by going out on the stump.
OK, then. Many thanks. And here's a list of the candidates standing to be Mayor of London on your screens now. The election takes place next Thursday on May the 2nd.
Good evening. Even by the standards of central London, it was an extraordinary sight, described as being both gruesome and like a weird dream. 5 military horses charging through rush hour, colliding with cars and buses. They escaped from an exercise session with the Household Cavalry after throwing off their riders. They were spooked by building work near Buckingham Palace. One of the horses you're about to see galloped through the streets stained with blood. Tonight, 3 soldiers and a member of the public are in hospital. Their conditions are not life-threatening. Here's our correspondent, Simon Harris.
Rush hour London and 2 riderless horses, one clearly bleeding, gallop through the streets. Londoners are used to a cacophony of noise, but rarely pounding hooves. The animals charge towards cyclists. The black horse catches the side of a taxi as it swerves the traffic. These extraordinary pictures at Aldwych, the panicked horses, saddled and bridled, the startled onlookers, were captured by a news photographer. 2 miles away outside the Claremont Hotel in Victoria, paramedics treated an injured soldier lying in the middle of the road. Across the street was a battered people carrier with broken windows, one of a number of vehicles hit by the runaways. It was close to here that 4 members of the Household Cavalry were unseated when 5 horses bolted.
Everybody started running, nobody knew what was going on. There was 2 or 3 horses running wild.
One of them hit the front of a double-decker tourist bus, smashing the windscreen.
3 more horses here around on the left side on the road, and one of them crashes in the bus. Yeah, and they was very scared. They ran like crazy, you know.
I heard noise of horses running,
So as I came out, there were 4 horses running from this way, and this big tour bus, they stand there, and 2 of them, they slooped in, so they had the space to go out, and 2 of them, basically one mainly collided with the bus window.
One of the horses headed towards Buckingham Palace. Another, possibly dazed, came to a standstill by the bus. At this stage, passers-by had no idea what was happening, but they did their best to calm the animal down.
So my colleague heard a bang, then I look outside and I saw this horse bleeding, and the bus was all cracked, so obviously he hit the bus, and he was all bleeding on his chest. It was bleeding quite badly, actually, and you could see people around just try to calm him down because he was getting a bit agitated.
The 2 horses, which galloped along Aldwych and Fleet Street, kept going for almost 5 miles before police officers caught up with them on the busy highway near Limehouse. The Household Cavalry is based at Hyde Park Barracks in Knightsbridge. In a brief statement, the Army said the horses broke free during their routine morning exercise. The spokesperson said the injured soldiers and animals were being given the appropriate treatment. The Household Cavalry is a familiar sight at major ceremonial events. 150 horses and riders can be seen training in London's streets and parks every day.
This keeps them fit and helps inoculate them to city noise so they're less easily panicked on parades. This morning, however, a small group of horses were spooked by some construction works on a quiet side road in Belgravia, where building materials were dropped from height right next to them. The ensuing shock caused all horses to bolt and unseated some riders.
It's believed the horses were frightened by the sound of building materials being dropped into a rubble chute. The 2 horses rounded up in East London were loaded into an army horse box and given a police escort back to the barracks. Simon Harris, ITV News, Westminster.
With only a week to go until polls open, time's running out for London's mayoral candidates to win your vote. Sadiq Khan may be ahead in the polls, but with divisive issues like crime and ULEZ, it's all still to play for. The gloves came off again between the main candidates in the latest debate, and despite Sadiq Khan's repeated denials, he couldn't escape more uncomfortable questions about plans for a pay-per-mile driver's charge on London's roads. Our political correspondent Simon Harris reports.
We're in it to win it, you know. Sadiq Khan began his campaign more than a month ago with a commanding lead in the opinion polls. And with a week to go, he can't afford to drop the ball. Today, he was playing a non-contact version of American football in Brixton to promote his manifesto promise to attract major sporting events to London.
That's a touchdown.
Khan is desperate to persuade Green and Liberal Democrat supporters to vote for him instead.
My nervousness is that those who may want to vote for the Greens or the Lib Dems or a smaller party voting with their heart may wake up on May the 3rd with a hard-right divisive Tory mayor.
But Khan has been unable to shake off his past enthusiasm for a form of road user charging known as pay per mile. In the latest televised mayoral debate, the host quoted from Khan's own book.
Plans to introduce more comprehensive road user charging system to be implemented, Sadiq, you said in your book, by the end of the decade.
Khan now insists it won't happen.
I've instructed the Commissioner to make sure any work that began under Boris Johnson is stopped in relation to pay per mile.
But his Conservative rival thinks she's found his Achilles heel.
£21 million has been spent on this already, and you know that. Sadiq Khan said he would never bring in the ULEZ expansion, and he did. Nobody trusts you anymore because you said you wouldn't do that. You're saying now, and you may be smirking, but this would actually really upset so many people.
The Green Party candidate, who was in Soho calling for more pedestrian schemes on London streets, thinks Sadiq Khan has other weaknesses.
I think Sadiq Khan, as the Mayor of London, hasn't been that strong enough voice to government about things that need to change for Londoners. So things around housing, things around the climate, and other transformational policies that Londoners really need to see a difference. It's the Mayor of London of a city of almost 9 million people, and it should be that loud voice to government.
Half as often as when he became mayor. That's an extra 1,000 people every year, sex offenders who should be locked up or should be captured and are not being captured.
A week from now, the campaign will be over. Londoners will be casting their votes, and the candidates will have nothing to do but wait for the results.
Simon, Sadiq Khan said he was nervous. Does the latest opinion poll suggest he should be?
Well, there's a new poll out today, carried out by Savanta for Queen Mary University in East London, which again gives Sadiq Khan a commanding lead over his Conservative rival. He's on 46% to Susan Hall's 33%, with Rob Blackie in third place on 9%, Zoe Garbett on 7% and Reform UK's Howard Cox on 2%. Now, when you compare this with the last Savanta survey 3 weeks ago, there's a slight narrowing of the gap. Khan's down a point, Hall's up a couple of points. And on the evidence of that, you'd say it's a pretty safe bet that he's going to be re-elected on May the 2nd. But his team continue to give the message that they really are worried about turnout. And of course, you have to remember, in the last 2 elections, he won with a very healthy margin. So a much reduced, drastically reduced majority, I'm sure he wouldn't enjoy that.
No. Simon, thank you. And here is a list of the candidates standing to be Mayor of London on your screens now. The election takes place, as Simon said, on Thursday, May the 2nd.